Cool. My title amazing. I thought a lot about what should my title be. I mean, you will hear more about what I do, but like in theory, I feel UX/DX doesn't get a lot of PMs, but hey, I feel designers and PM have like this love-hate relationship, and I thought that ideally it should be a match made in heaven, right? Like you work together, you come up with great ideas, you launch great products. But is that the case? I don't know, and that's where I thought that let's put this question in the title itself. A bit about me. My name is Madhvin, SPM, work at Booking.com, take care of the mobile platform. I've lived in a lot of places. So I live in the Netherlands right now. Before that, I've lived in Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, India. Before joining Booking.com, I was working as a PM in AirAsia, which is one of world's leading low-cost airline. And before that, I was in a Belgium company called Barco. And in my previous life, I like to say I was actually a developer. So I was actually doing hands-on coding, developing mobile apps. On a personal note, I love learning languages, so I can speak Mandarin fluently. I can speak a bit of Spanish, trying to learn a bit of Dutch. I love talking about products. I was in Zurich Product Management Festival talking about career growth. Before that, I was also in Agile Manchester, where I talked about diversity at workplace for product managers. So, yeah, I love public speaking in general. And let's start today's topic with a very common scenario. I think most people here who work in future teams would agree. Usually as a PM would go to a developer and we would have this Slack message or a meeting saying that, hey, here's something really cool. I want to get this done. What do you think? A developer would be like, okay, your PRD looks good. Let me take a look at this. I'm going to get back on how things are. A week passes, I nudge the person like, hey, what do you think? And the developer is like, yeah, it looks good. Everything is fine. There is some work needed, but yeah, not a lot of stuff to do. And there is a question which is usually thrown, like, I noticed that you got a couple of designs in there. When are we gonna get those mocks ready? And that's a question which like every PM hates because somehow you're like, why don't you get the work started? And this is what a reply is often, where you are like, you know what? It's not a lot of work on design. Just get started. You will get the designs real soon. Uh, and here is a poor designer. There somewhere. There's a reason why I put it at the end because they're usually somewhere who is like, yeah, I know you. I'm hearing about this cool feature, but no one is approaching me. Like, what's gonna happen? Are you gonna draw the design yourself? And eventually, I do, which is like 4 days or 3 days or the minimum amount of time, and I go to the designer and I'm like, you know what? Can I get a Figma? Can I get a prototype for this amazing PRD? And I drop a nice message saying by next week. I'm not a designer, but I can already feel the designer at that moment is like, okay, but actually I'm pretty sure, and based on my years working with designers and researchers and those folks, they have a lot of questions. Things like, hey, who are the people who are going to be using this? How can I actually help? Why are we doing this? Can you share with me the bigger picture? Because I know how designers think. They are all about the bigger picture, trying to understand what is the bigger problem we are trying to solve. And obviously, as a PM, sometimes I'm like, please don't make something crazy. I want this to be rolled out. I got OKRs to complete. Please don't slow us down. I will be honest, I've been at this stage where I felt like, and I've heard this, and I can personally see that often I have this fear of going to a designer expecting things to already slow down. And of course, I will tell why it's so wrong. But often, all of these things are in a PM's mind, and that is one of the big problems, which I will talk that how a lot of product managers don't actually see designer as a core part. They don't consider them to be, a partner in crime, but rather like a support team, which hopefully doesn't slow them down. And then I like to call this as the anti-collaboration pattern, where eventually the designs are ready, and the developer is like, what the hell? This was not a part of the deal. I can't do this. This is so much work. These are animations. I can't do this. And the poor product manager at this moment is like, can I just die? Like, you know, I promised everything to the developer. My, I don't know, VP of product is expecting a launch, and this is what I'm going to deal with. But this is really true, and this might seems like I'm really overreacting, but this is true. In a lot of places, this happens quite a lot where devs and designers and PMs are never on the same page. And I can talk about amazing teams. I'm not going to name anyone, but think of the big names, products you use, happens everywhere. And eventually, no one is happy. A developer, and I know because I've worked in technical teams, developers often feel that they're just changing stuff. They implement something and then they have to change something. PMs feel like they're just hoping and praying they can get a design ready because they don't really validate stuff. And designers are feeling that they can't really contribute. They are basically doing stuff for their PM, but they don't really get the chance to showcase what they can do. And I got this from ChatGPT. I mean, let's be honest. I could never create something like this, but this is actually what I imagine a room would be, where no one is happy. There is an amazing roadmap and there is an amazing design idea, but they are all isolated. And this is, I think, actually what happens quite a lot. So I thought about how can I help my product managers and designers to solve this better? And if anyone thinks, what is the impact on product? Then I've got two product reviews here. I didn't mention the company, but if you read them, you can clearly see how customers are complaining about the design being off. And for me, this is a typical example of a lack of collaboration and a lack of developers, PMs, designers just being on different thought process altogether. So I thought, let's retrospect. Let's see what goes wrong. How can we not do these things? Because the reason why I'm here and hopefully the viewers are here is to ensure we don't have these mistakes. So I'm going to talk about a product which I launched. I was in AirAsia. It was our own in-house wallet. It's quite common where you can add money and you can spend on things within the app. We had quite tight timelines. It was like a couple of months. It might look long, but for a product to be launched to go to the market, it's a tight timeline. We have a lot of moving parts. I remember we had finance and payment and marketing, and usually with a pocket, you have legal things as well. And there was vagueness, like we were not sure what is to be delivered, what might change. The scope kept changing. Typical product stuff. If you work with product teams, when there is something new, things do change. But I'm going to talk through this journey where I think uh, I committed some of those mistakes which I mentioned, but then also I would like to explain how I kind of overcome those mistakes and how can you as a designer also work better with product managers. So I'm going to talk about learnings. I think the first learning, and for me this is so important, is that y- product managers and organizations in general need to embed design in the heart of product lifecycle. It's got to be there very early. So if I look at this product lifecycle where, and this is very generic one, but you know the drill. You think of an idea, you develop a concept, you start developing, you roll something out. Often I realize that designers are involved during development where everything is ready, you have decided the metrics and everything else. But I truly believe that the right point to involve them is much earlier. It's got to be when you're creating the idea, when you are validating the idea. And I get it that PMs have more business context, but designers always have a lot of input. They understand the user problems you're trying to solve. So a message would be get your designers involved. And if you're a designer, try to be involved much more early. And I got this amazing picture from ChatGPT. I love this. It's called the plant growth metaphor, where essentially the picture on the left shows if designers are too late, everything is done in isolation. You don't get the fruits. While if they are involved early and things are much more collaborative, you can have those amazing fruits. So again, the learning for us was that we involved designers and research from day zero, not even day one. Like even when we were developing this, they were involved. I gave use cases and motivation. Designers gave thought on designs and the flow and the bigger picture. We did validation. We had bi-weekly updates. Again, earlier and more frequent is always better. The second part, I'm not a big fan of models. But this McKinsey model is something which I really like. McKinsey has a lot of useless models. This one is really good, and it's called the trust equation. And I think it doesn't matter if you're a designer, if you're a product manager, if you're anywhere, if you have stakeholders and if you have people you work together with, this is really important. And this is basically trust is built by credibility, reliability, intimacy, and it's decreased if you are self-oriented. And apply this everywhere with everyone with your work, and you will realize how easy it is to develop trust. In our case, since it was a PM and design relationship, we decided the best way to develop this trust is again by thinking of all those three things. So credibility, extremely important. If you're a product manager, give the bigger picture. If you're a designer, think about already what kind of user problems the the picture is trying to solve. What kind of behaviors would you expect? Reliability. If you promise something, deliver. If you're a product manager, give those updates. Let the designers know where we are. If you're a designer, stick to your timelines. Explain how things are. Get your design reviews done. Don't wait for product managers to nudge you. And intimacy, which is like meet often. Yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine where I see like the interaction between designers and PM is like so inorganic. It's just meeting when you have to meet them. The meeting should be much more often. And also meet in good and bad. And don't just meet like when you're having an amazing time. Even if things are wrong, go and nudge your designers. And again, don't be selfish. Don't disrespect designers. Think of them as a team. Uh, uh, a typo. It's not don't talk about their importance, but do talk about their importance. So it's very important, like you as a product manager, let your leaders know how important designers are. Give them timely feedback. Don't isolate designers. So essentially, you can build trust if you're credible, if you're reliable, if you have intimacy, and if you're not selfish. And we did during AirAsia, where we had data sources and PRD up to date. Designers always kept me involved in their feedback sessions. When I was managing things upwards, I kept design decisions clear. We had a lot of interaction. So build this trust and you're going to go a long way. My third point is about clear boundaries. Again, I kind of feel all the things which I'm saying can be so generic. You could use it for a PM EM, PM research, a designer. It could be applied for any two people, but essentially have clear boundaries. I got this generic one, but the key message is uh, don't be afraid to draw boundaries. I know it's counterintuitive where you want to work together, but boundaries are really useful because then you have a very clear separation. So you need to have boundaries on what are the timelines, who owns what kind of data you need. Saying no is okay. This was a huge thing where we accepted that at times you're gonna say difficult no's. Take breaks. When you're tired, just cancel a meeting and say, I just want to think about this piece of work. Share your frustrations. It's so common in projects that people don't share frustrations, and in the end it shows in their design. Or if you're a product manager, in the end it shows during your product reviews. And be open in communication. There is no you need to make ground rules where the first rule is that you could a PM could ask as stupid of a question, and a designer could ask anything. So be open in communication. And I think in AirAsia we did that quite well. Where it was like I was preparing the why and the what. I was owning the data. I was doing stakeholder management. My role was to take care of priority expectations, while my designers were taking care of deliveries and reviews and feedback loops and all of that good stuff. So really setting up very clear boundaries is extremely important, and this will help you to avoid chaos, because often when a problem comes, you're not sure who owns it and who should be taking a first stab at it. But in this way, if you have the trust, it's quite clear on who owns what. And then I love Gordon Ramsay, and I love this song. So this might be very specific, but I also feel that often I used to see, at least in my teams, and I will show my picture, that I am like a person in the middle, but actually I shouldn't be there. So a common scenario which happened to me, like during my sprints, is like a dev would ask me that, hey, I need the right icon, I need the right animation, and then I would ask my designer that, what, could you do that? And then I would get like a reverse Uno played to me, which is like, can I know for which OS? And it used to really bug me out because ideally I shouldn't be there. I mean, uh, these are two people who can communicate with each other, but the reality is, I think their work and the way, it's like the opposite ends of spectrum. Engineers are extremely technical and they need really concrete information, while designers can be a bit more high level. But I think one of the things which a good product manager should do is to initiate the bridge. So ideally, I'm not saying you shouldn't be there, but for often when these questions are asked, you could just enable that bridge for engineers to speak with the designers. And I can tell you, it's such a huge shift in mindset, because once your designers start speaking a bit of tech language, and once your engineers start understanding a bit on how design works, you will feel so much better as a product manager. And I know this talk is not for PMs, but I'm speaking to all the designers who are here. Don't be afraid to ask questions to your engineers. If you think that that font is not correct, if you think that this animation is too slow, you should have the capacity to speak to a developer and straight up say that, hey, there is something off. And how I did this was, there are some common meetings. Like if you're a product manager, you meet with your developers in stand-ups and groomings. And if you're a designer, you would probably do have like a design PM sync, a design review. Try to get people in these meetings where you can say that, hey, why don't we have a designer today join our stand-up very quickly so that the question can be answered? Why don't we have a developer join a design PM sync where he can get clarity on his question? So the important part is that once that silo breaks down, and I think it's just once it breaks down, the interaction becomes much more smoother. I think this is very important. This really worked for me, where we got these two people much more independent. So like I said, encourage that direct communication, even though it's difficult. Get them in the same meeting, get them in the same room. It's chaotic, but it really works. And let them develop their own boundaries, just like PMs and designers have boundaries. Designers and tech will also have boundaries, but enables that close collaboration which all organizations want. I mean, being in leadership, we always say that data scientists and researchers and designers and marketing and product marketing should speak with each other. But these are the things which we can do to enable that, and you will also save yourself a lot of headache. I'm getting to the end of my presentations. So this is to prove it did work. That's our wallet which we did launch. Everything was fine. This is just showing that it did work, and I'm just not making things up. Uh, and here are some key takeaways, because I always like to finish with things you can do from tomorrow. Which means that tomorrow, when you start working, you can start doing these changes. So first, communicate more, communicate early, communicate frequently, have that trust and respect. Think of what do others expect from you, what do you expect from them. Embed design into your product lifecycle. Don't wait for that last moment. Have that feeling of togetherness where you win together, you lose together, and be transparent. Be transparent when you need or are working with tight timelines. Be transparent when you don't need designers and you can actually give them more time to do what they like. And I think this is the end of my talk. More than happy to answer any questions, more than happy to share my slide. Here's a QR code if you do want to add me on LinkedIn. Yeah, that is the end of my talk. I think we have exactly 11 minutes to go for a Q&A. So Rory, happy to take any questions, if any.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Madhvan. So everybody out there, if you have any questions, please do write them in and I'll put those questions through. But the first question that I'm going to start with is, and it's a difficult one. It's all well and good saying get people involved earlier. It's all well and good saying we should engage people more. But then we get the budget question, and it costs money to get people involved. So it's the
Yeah,
whole point is, well, we need to do this quick and lean, and that's not efficient. So how do you handle the budget question?
yeah, that's a really nice one to get started, Rory. So, and I would love to be very frank, and I will try to be as frank as I can. But I think you need to. So, being someone who has gone through these things, you need to show it works. my biggest way to get approval of budget is to show cases where, and I can tell you, we have had projects where because of budget, we had to share, and there's a whole debate of decentralized versus centralized designers. But we had projects where we decided, hey, let's not have any designer and let's go with it. And I can tell you, we didn't do very well. We did launch it, but we had to spend a lot of time reiterating with designers to show that nah, it's not good. So I would say, to answer your question, have sponsors where you have done great work, where you show the value of designers, and when you go into that meetings with leadership, make it clear what would the impact of not a designer be. Maybe you can get an MVP, hey, maybe you can get an increment, but eventually if your target is to be there, you would need speciality. So I would say, look for good cases where you have won, and try to again formulate what could the contribution be. And usually, I think a couple of times it's difficult, but once you actually start showing the value, it eases out. I get it, not every project will get a full-time design team, you might need to share resources, but it's still better than having a PM draw designs, right? So I would still say it's worth fighting for.
And should people go for a full time design? Like, should that be the goal, or should they start with kind of part time?
Yeah, look, again, every org does it differently. If it's a much more mature organization, I can get it that they would have the luxury to have a huge design department. I have been in situations where I had to share designers. So I would say there is no perfect answer, but I always believe that if you do have scarcity of resources, having a centralized model, well, not centralized, a centralized model, right, where you can have designers for each project, is good, because then each designer works on A and a B and a C. But I think eventually I like the decentralized pattern, because if you have one designer for one product, that designer doesn't feel like a support team. He is there, he would be able to work with you on roadmaps. So I would say, yeah, there is no perfect answer, but yeah, you could always consider having a shared approach to start off. But once you see that you are doing quite well, and you want to reach the scales of millions, then you probably would benefit with a much more dedicated resource.
Great. We do have a comment rather than a question from Paul, just saying, I'm a PM with a UX design background. Honestly, I think PMs without at least some basic UX design skills are like fish out of water.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, look, I do agree that most PMs should have basic UX, and I think most of us do. But I think it's also what works against us. Like, a lot of the PMs think that it's a simple UI and a simple mock which they can make. But that's my point: is design is not just about mocks and UI. It's much more about understanding user behavior and getting the bigger picture. And actually, everyone loves things like conversions and bookings and getting those great numbers. And I really do believe having a great design sense there is something where designer can contribute a lot. So yeah, I think sometimes we can be our own enemies by thinking that we could handle that, but then we realize that we never thought of this flow, and we never thought about how do we make our products much more inclusive. There are a lot of things now if you're looking to target millions and have products across geographies.
Great. Another kind of thorny one. What about people who don't want to be collaborating as closely? It's great to say, oh, we should get everybody, and everybody wants to do it. But I've worked with some people, and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. You just tell me, and that's your job.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have also had this kind of people. What I said is very ideal. Uh, if the person can do their job well, it should be fine. Here is what I believe. I get it. Every person is different. I totally get it. In an ideal world, uh, uh, living and working with that is going to be difficult in the long run. But again, I would again really try to show the values. I'm really like, I believe in doing things. So if you can probably show and explain that, look, you want to work on your own, it's fine. But do you want to spend hours reiterating, or do you just want to get in a room and get this done? And that often moves the needle, because even as PMs, I've had people who are like, I don't want to attend a meeting, just send me a Google Doc. And then you spend like hours on that Google Doc, and then you ask like yourself, like, we could do this in half an hour if we were just sitting in a room. So why don't you and the designer and a developer sit in a room and get that sorted out? And everyone loves free time, right? You get 2 hours of free time, you can go out there. So maybe just proving that if you want to be alone, you can, but then you're going to be spending a lot more time. And I think that no one wants to spend more time, on things which they can do quicker.
Yeah, no, that's a great approach to it. We have another question from Patrick, and I'll just summarize it a little bit. He's saying he has a great PM UX relationship, but not so great PM engineering relationship. So, what's your advice in such a situation, and what
Yeah, I need to do
combination?
another talk for that, Patrick. I could speak hours about that. Look, very quickly, a lot of those points. Look, it cannot be quick because PM and engineers again different. I like to call it. I hope my EM is not here. I like to call it a different dinosaur, because it's much more different. I think a lot of these things apply. But again, it's a bit different because usually I think the expectations are different, and I think EMs are a lot more about tight estimations and ensuring that their developers are not being, are not working on things which are never gonna go live. So I would say I would love to kind of, I don't know, connect with you separately. I have so much experience working with directors of technology and SEMs. So I would say the process is the same, but there are nuances, but those nuances are quite big. But yeah, essentially, again, be transparent, develop that trust, and also kind of involve engineers early, and don't just go to them with a PRD saying, get a developer for me, and I want this delivered in a month. That probably not going to work very well. But yeah, maybe a different topic one day for me to talk about.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a difficult one. And on that, actually, one of the things that often a developer might say is, and I know this from my development days as well, context switching is really distracting.
Yeah.
So you can be really focused on something, you're really thinking deeply, and then somebody taps you on the shoulder and you lose it all, and it takes you a while to get back in. So back to your points about more frequent and constant communication, how
Yep.
do you find that balance between, I guess, over communication and too frequent?
That is a very good point, and this is where I feel it's the team who needs to decide that. I know people who want over communication, but I also know people who, like you mentioned, do not like context switching, and that's why I can tell you in AirAsia we had like a weekly one, and no one liked it because it was too much, and then we had like a monthly one, but then that was too frequent, and eventually we settled down for once every 2 weeks. So again, it's like you iterate and you try to work what's best for you. But I totally agree that context switching is real. Maybe I can do it very fast because part of my job does involve meeting with everyone, but find your own balance by maybe optimizing it. So a TLDR is, don't just do it because you have to set up a meeting. Don't do it just because there has to be a recurring meeting. Do it when you feel that everyone involved can contribute, and then that will take care of context switching. So yeah, decide what suits best for everyone. Play around with it a bit.
Brilliant. Well, I think that pretty much takes us to time. So I just want to thank you once again for sharing. I thought it was a great, interesting, topical talk that we had a lot of engagement as well. So thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you so much, and yeah, more than happy to take questions on LinkedIn or any other platform. And yeah, thanks again, folks, for joining.